Dr. Christina Policastro, thank you so much for joining us today on our Marcy's Law interview series, Why We Do What We Do. I really appreciate it, especially with the school year starting up, that you took some time for us.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, as young as you are, you've been described to me as a legend in the victims' rights space and the victimology space. So we really appreciate your sharing your
Yeah.
insights with us. And one of the first times I heard about you was our state director in Tennessee in Marcy's Law was fortunate enough to be a student or a participant in one of your presentations at Victim Assistance Training Academy that we'll talk about in a little bit, Bonnie Brazina. And she was so absolutely impressed by everything that you do that she's trying to figure out a way to get into one of your courses. So
I would love to have her in one of my courses. She was great as an academy participant.
now, having said that, I just wanted to just start with your bio and how it was that you became interested in victims' rights. One of the reasons that we have this series titled Why We Do What We Do is, as you and I have discussed, people that are in this space have been drawn to it for a whole lot of different reasons. Sometimes, and more often than not, a tragedy actually is the impetus for people trying to see if they could make turn pain into purpose, as people say. Sometimes it's people that are in academia, like yourself. So, what was it that got you motivated to get into this space and get interested in victims' rights?
Yeah, so my path is a little different. I've always been interested in justice. So I started out criminal justice major undergrad and into my graduate work, and all through high school and college I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I think I've always wanted to help victims and survivors. Never really had personal experience other than my mother's childhood and adolescence, knowing about some of the unhealthy behaviors that happened in her household. And she was always very upfront about that and always very resilient. And so was my grandmother. And I was always drawn to that, understanding how those dynamics happen and how to help individuals who are in those situations. I had an alcoholic grandfather, so dealing with those things, and that really drew me to that. I really wanted to be pursue I wanted to be a prosecutor. I had this noble idea of what prosecutors did. Got to law school, realized that wasn't for me. That was not my life trajectory, and really went back to graduate school and was introduced to the study of victimization and all the things that could happen there. I'm a first generation college student, so I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And when I got into graduate school, they put me in a classroom during my master's that early on, and I fell in love with it. I was introduced to Helen Eigenberg. I'll talk about her here in a minute with the Victims Academy. She was one of my mentors, and her and other great faculty here at UTC encouraged me to go on to get a PhD. And I went to Georgia State, met some great folks down there that do some awesome work. Some of the leading victimologists in the field: Leah Daigle, Brian Payne, Mary Finn, Brent Teasdale. Got involved with research. Never thought I would ever say I liked research ever. And I was good at it. I loved it. And I expanded some of my focus in victimization there. And I've been doing it ever since and really hope to contribute to the knowledge in the field.
Well, you certainly have. I'm familiar with a lot of your publications. I've read through a lot of your research. It's both it's really impressive in the level and the depth of knowledge that you're able to share with your publications. And in addition to your PhD at Georgia State, you have criminal justice degrees in both undergrad and a master's at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, right?
Yes. I got my undergraduate and my master's degree here, and then criminology and criminal justice at Georgia State.
And now, what do you teach right now at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga?
Oh, I teach quite a bit. My main areas of focus are victimology. I teach that course, which is kind of just this broad overview of all forms of victimization and the study of crime victims. And then family violence is an area because while at Georgia State and at UTC during my graduate work and to today, I focused on intimate partner violence, sexual victimization, and elder abuse. So I've taught family violence. I teach stats. I love statistics. It's my area. I love it. And research methods are some of the key areas. And I do an ethics course as well at both. I've taught all of these at the grad and undergrad level.
Now, one of the important things that we've realized as we go around the country
Mhm.
is to assist and educate the providers, the people that are in this space, whether they're victim advocates, people involved in children's advocacy centers, people in district attorney's office. And when you're talking about a statewide education,
Mhm.
one of the challenges is trying to get all of the stakeholders in a room at one time and try to get everybody singing off the same song sheet, and probably even more practically to have all of these people be able to connect with each other and use each other as resources as inevitable questions come up, in trying to assist victims and have them navigate the criminal justice system. What you've done in Tennessee is fantastic. The collaboration that you had, and have with the Tennessee Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, which is an incredible organization. And could you tell us a little bit about the partnership that you have with them, and specifically with the Tommy Burke's Victim Assistance Academy?
Of course, yes. So I started working with Tommy Burks in 2018. I took over for actually my mentor, Dr. Helen Eigenberg. She was really significant in working with the coalition to get that Tommy Burks off the ground. And she did a lot of work with the coalition in the state, starting in the early 2000s. And Tommy Burks has been around since about 2006, 2008. And I took over in 2018. She unfortunately was sick and since has passed and has left us huge hole in the survivor community because she contributed a lot. But I stepped in, and I'm really happy to continue her legacy with Tommy Burks. And like you said, I work with the Tennessee Coalition. So what we do is I apply every year. It is a grant, it's competitive, and we've been happy to host it here at UTC ever since it started. And it's a 40 week, that would be awful. 40 hours a week in June, the first full week of June. We host anywhere from 50 to 60 individuals who are working in victim services and advocacy. So it's a diverse audience. And they get that 40 hours of intensive training here at UTC with experts in the field, folks who have worked extensively with victims, with the whole goal being that when you're entering victims advocacy work or assistance, whether you're working with batterer intervention programs, you're working direct services as an advocate with the courts, in corrections, that you might come in with an experience, but we want all advocates to have a base toolkit level of knowledge in all these different areas, that equips them to effectively serve victims and to, not burn out at their job. So depending, we have quite a few required little sessions during the week that are based on our grant or based on NOVA certification, because they can get those NOVA credentialing. They can apply for it through NOVA, the National Organization of Victim Advocacy. And it's all kinds of topics: history of victimization, history of the study of victims' rights. We talked about it before, vicarious trauma. I've done specialty topics on cyber victimization. So you have a host of speakers that come. I do some of the sessions. There's great opportunities for networking. It has been a phenomenal experience for me in the short time I've been involved since 2018 to see advocates come from across the state, or just individuals who are working in the victims fields. Like you said, Bonnie was there and working with legislation, and talk about all their different experiences and some of the things they see in their work and come together to help serve victims better. And it's been a phenomenal opportunity. And working with Jennifer Eskew at Tennessee Coalition and Megan Batista, I can't say enough good things about the coalition and the support they offer to the victims services field. They do amazing work and are so passionate about what they do. So it's been a pleasure to be a part of that experience here at UTC.
Yeah, it really is incredible and important work that you all do when you bring everybody together like that,
Mhm.
and especially the wisdom and then the practical knowledge combined
Oh, yeah.
when you have people who are on the ground and then people in academia like yourself,
Mhm.
and then the years of experience are really invaluable. One of the things that I just want to touch on a couple. I mean, you have such a wide range of specific topics that you educate people on and you can talk about. I wanted to just focus on just a couple in the time that we had. One, which is really these days, it's really of particular note, is cyber victimization. Can you tell us a little bit about cyber victimization and how you see it and how people address it and what you teach on it?
Yeah, so this is actually a new avenue of research I'm pursuing right now. I'm actually collecting data from undergraduate students. Um, and the angle I come at, so cyber victimization is a broad range of offenses. It can include anything from, like phishing emails that get access to your bank accounts and things like that, that might be strangers or somebody from across, the globe. The area that I'm really interested in and that I focus on in Tommy Burke's, or anytime I'm presenting on it, is intimate partner violence that is facilitated through the cyber environment, or sexual based offenses that are facilitated through the internet or devices. So I talk a lot about coercive control. So those controlling behaviors that abusive partners might use, the internet. So we're seeing not so much like a new type of victimization. We're seeing people who are now using the tools that the internet provides, social media provides, electronic devices that have advanced to control their partners. So I'm actually collecting data on that right now. Currently, I think I have about 150 surveys from undergraduates looking at how their partners might pursue them through social media. And like what's interesting is that what the research shows is that in terms of cyber victimization by partners, there's a lot of concern about high-tech things like spyware getting installed on people's phones, but abusers are really using low-tech methods to pursue them. They're stalking people on social media. They're using, they're creating an email address where somebody thinks it's the victim reaching out to them when it's really the abuser. They're using things like the Life 360. Have you heard of that? Like you're a parent, like so some of the parenting tools that parents use to keep track of their kids in the internet, they're installing those on their partner's phone. They know their partner's passwords. So that's some of the things that I talk about. And when I talk about it at Tommy Burke's, this was the first time I talked about it this year, was how we can implement some of this into safety planning. Because sometimes when we safety plan, it's really geared towards those face-to-face contacts, maybe not cyber context, and how we can ensure safety for victims on the internet through their devices, things that they might not have thought about, and make people more comfortable with that. Sorry, I have a call. But yes, that's really what I focus on there, as well as cyber facilitated sexual abuse. So things like non-consensual pornography. We talked about that. And a lot of times that's a partner, somebody who is committing those types of offenses. So that's a new space I'm getting into. And I think it's very under-researched because, as you know, with technology, it's constantly evolving and our laws are a little slow to catch up, as well as our response. So it's an avenue that I think is going to be very interesting to see how we can combat that more effectively.
Yeah, well, and like you and I have discussed before, it's the double-edged the blessing and the curse of technology and technological
Yeah.
advances. And to your point before, especially as parents, uh,
Mm-hmm.
you can never be careful enough with and I just when you look at kids today and all the access that they have and all the information that they have, really without enough limits,
Mm-hmm.
as much as we try as parents or even as educators to try to crack the code to make sure that they're able to get the information that they need from a positive perspective, but then make sure you can sift out the unnecessary stuff, but really, to your point, the dangerous stuff. Um,
Yeah, and when I present at Tommy Burke's, one of the things we talk about is that access. Like, I think it's the most recent it's the Pew organization doing research and then also educational statistics. I think it's like 98% of kids have a smartphone or access to it. And then talking about safely navigating that, and what we're seeing is even these abusive behaviors between partners starting as early as adolescence and going on into college age and into adulthood.
Yeah, and the frightening thing is, the parents' generation now knows considerably less than some of the 12-year-olds. And so
Yes.
you can think you have a handle on it all you want, and then the kids are at their sleepover just kind of laughing, saying, "Oh yeah, my mom thinks that she actually blocked this, but she didn't."
Exactly. And just how to navigate that, because we're in a society, and even talking about this with victims, where our tendency is to say just eliminate access. If your partner's falling on social media, get rid of it. We don't live in a day and age where we necessarily can do that because everyone uses it. Like if you think about your child's school, I know mine uses social media to convey messages. We have apps that they talk to us on. It's not as easy to just say, get rid of it. So how do we safely navigate those conversations? I think is important.
Yeah, and it's gonna and it's evolving as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to shift gears from something that's evolving as we speak, if the other thing that you present on that people have told me that they love to hear your presentation on this is the history of victims' rights.
It's
Um,
funny you say they love it. It's 2 hours at Victims Academy, so I'm glad they do.
so could you tell us a little bit about victims' rights and the evolution of victims' rights and how we got to where we are today, as much as you could give us a Reader's Digest version?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and that is a lot of information to cover in this setting, but I can kind of give you an overview. So my whole goal when I talk about the history of the study of victimization, of victims' rights and legislation and services and responses to victims is to kind of show this how we, where victims were early on in the process to where we've gotten today, because I think it's very important as we've talked about. I'm a college professor. I think it's very important for whoever I'm talking to realize where we were really impacts where we are today, and can highlight why some of the holes that exist, as well as why we have some of the things we have that have come a long way. So I always start way back when we lived in communal societies, before we had police, before we had courts, before we had correction, formal agencies. The victim really took a central role in the criminal justice process, which wasn't a process, but because there was no formal system, it was up to the victim or their family to pursue justice. So that was very victim-centered justice, which is a buzzword we hear a lot today. And, there were issues with it, because what if you were a victim in a low standing? What if you could not pursue justice? What if you, were isolated from even within a communal society? But the victim really did have a say. Like, if you stole my chicken, I want another chicken, that kind of thing. It was a very eye for an eye retribution type framework. And as we move into the industrial, revolution, and where people start to move to cities and less communal living, we see the state step in on behalf of the victim. And we see the victim getting kind of shifted to this peripheral role of, you are a witness. And a lot of folks in academia and in victim services highlight, with that shift, the victims really, their voice is lost, and we focus more on offenders. I mean, I have criminal justice degrees. It's not victim justice. In my field, we study offenders. We study why they offend. And when I teach a class on victimology, a lot of times, depending on where I'm at, students are like, this is the first time we talked about victims. So with that shift, victims, we've been fighting since that shift for victims to have their voice back. And that's where you see legislation, different services emerge through the 60s, 70s, and up into the 80s and 90s. Different, victims' rights amendments emerge. You see VAWA, Violence Against Women Act, emerged to fund money down for victim services and responses to victims. And still today, we hear that call that the victim's voice is lost, and that, victims feel re-victimized when they go through the criminal justice process. The research shows that. So a lot of times during those presentations, or when I'm talking about victims' rights, it's highlighting why that happened and how we're trying to address that today.
Now, one topic that you talked about
Mm-hmm.
as far as, well, first of all, when you talk about your criminal justice degree, it's not called victims justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's still frightening today when you look at law school textbooks, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
criminal procedure or criminal law books, the amount of times that victims, that even the word victim or victims' rights are even mentioned in a
Mm-hmm.
criminal law textbook or even in a criminal law class, that's changing, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the evolution, it's almost come full circle where victim-centered
Yes.
victim-centered philosophies
Mm-hmm.
are a little bit more prevalent now. And really in prosecutors' offices and victim service providers, people like Jennifer Eskew and all of
Mm-hmm.
these great organizations around Tennessee and around the country, educators like yourself are bringing it back to the forefront, which is a great thing.
Oh, yeah. And you'll see if you start to look at programs across the United States within criminal justice departments, often, I know Sam Houston is one of them. They have a victim studies degree. So you're starting to see an emerging focus. And even within criminal justice programs, like we have a victim services certificate now, where you're having more individuals study victimization and argue that we need to look at both sides of this equation because it's not just a victim and offender. And sometimes those people are the same people. So we have that overlap and the need to address victimization and respond to victims.
One of the other subject matters that you're an expert in is the whole idea of ethics around victims' rights,
Mhm.
and I know you present on that as well. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you talk about and what you teach with respect to ethics in the victims' rights space?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to start a little generally. So I've been teaching ethics to criminal justice students since 2016-ish. It's a required course in our curriculum. So I almost teach that every semester. So when I took over Tommy Burke's, that was one of the required sessions. And I was super excited about it because I love talking about the philosophical tenets of it. I'm not a philosopher, but the philosophical aspect of ethics and questioning what's moral and what's right. And what excites me about talking about it with victim service professionals is how it applies practically in their job and the tools that they can have. So within those presentations that I do to victim service providers, as well as my students, I like to give them scenarios that relate to some of the key dilemmas that they might encounter in the field that they might not have thought of. And if you think about Tommy Burks, a lot of these individuals that are coming are relatively new to their job. But we do have some folks that are more experienced who've transitioned into these roles. And so they might not have encountered some of the issues with, conflict of interest, knowing your boundaries, knowing how to prevent burnout, and knowing, to see those things and how that can influence their interactions with their clients, with other service providers, with criminal justice professionals. So we often go through a lot of different exercises of, here's a scenario. Let's talk about what the dilemma is. What are your ethical rules within your organization and as an advocate? And how does that apply here? How, is this a tough situation? Who would you go to? So thinking through practical steps before they're in the field, it's not going to prepare them completely because we can't do that in a classroom scenario because who knows what happens in the real world. But walking through those and ensuring that within their agencies, when they go back, they have those conversations. Like if I encounter this and I have a client who I'm no longer working with that wants to be my friend, how do I navigate that conversation? What is my ethical obligation there? It's been really enlightening and I think very helpful to the folks at the Victims Academy going through those different scenarios and knowing some of the overarching principles of ethical victim assistance.
Yeah, and one of the things that you touched on a couple of times is the whole idea of burnout, even with respect to ethics. Just before we wrap up, the whole idea and the concept of vicarious trauma.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people haven't really heard of the notion of vicarious trauma until they get into this field and been working in it for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and then sometimes actually in the very beginning of a career in this victims' rights space, whether I've been to conferences with people who are working in this space, and they didn't really even know there was a name for it.
Right.
What they experience by dealing with this kind of work every single day. Can you
Mhm.
talk to us just a little bit about vicarious trauma in the time that we have left?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head by saying once they heard about it, they realized they knew what it was. So when we think about vicarious trauma, it's emotional distress that's tied to listening to other or hearing about encountering other people's trauma. So naturally, when you think about victims advocates or individuals who work with survivors, that's going to be a reality of their life as they're experiencing. They might not have firsthand experienced the victimization, but just hearing about it causes emotional distress, anxiety, could cause depression, could change their world outlook. And if you think about the types of individuals who are drawn to victim service work, it's often because they're empathetic. They care about victims. They want to see justice. They might have experienced victimization before, as we talked about why we do what we do. What you said, a lot of people are drawn to it because they firsthand experienced it or had a secondary experience with victimization. So naturally, they're going to take some of that on and that emotional burden and that emotional labor So within our curriculum for Tommy Burke's is vicarious trauma, and we have some great educators who talk about how to recognize the signs of that in yourself and things that they can do to, reduce that trauma, when to know to reach out, how to talk to your supervisor about it, how we can make victim service more conducive to allowing people to work through that and have resources for them. So, recognizing when you're short tempered or when you think everything in the world is bad, and that you are really taking that on, how to step back and go beyond just, self care as I'm going to go eat a Big Mac because that makes me feel better, or I'm going to go shopping, knowing, there are other types of things that we need to go deeper into to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of clients or whoever we're working with. And, I love the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. We all think about that. You have to take care of yourself first. It's like when you're on the plane, put the mask on you, and then you can help other people. That's the whole idea about vicarious trauma. And interestingly, I always think about, I did a study very early on in my career when I was actually a PhD student, thinking about how when we're talking to students about crime and violence, whether that could actually traumatize them because, if they haven't thought about these things, it could make them more fearful, especially if they're victims, if it could be re-traumatizing. And in that study, we actually found that in classes where we talk about violence, we make people more anxious sometimes. And oftentimes what we found was that in those classes, professors weren't providing resource information, which is very concerning to me, to students. And a big message from that was, when we're talking to people, realize that they can take on that trauma. They can vicariously be victimized, secondary trauma, and providing them with resources to help them through that is very important.
Yeah, and I think whether it's educators or experts in the field who um, talk about vicarious trauma with people who are in the victims' rights space, the ones that we talk about who heard the term for the first time and know that it's actually a thing, and it has a name, and it's what they've been experiencing even as for the past 6 months or so, and it makes them feel as though they actually can do their job because they were going to their job in the courthouse or wherever they were going and saying, I don't know if I could do this anymore.
It's
And it's like,
validating, right? It's very
exactly.
validating. And I think it's also kind of empowering to know this has a name. This is why I'm experiencing it. And there are tools that exist. And, and sometimes when we talk about it with people, they realize this might not be the field for me. Maybe I want to help victims in a different way. Maybe I need to move into a different position to where I am better taking care of myself and other people. I think that's also important.
Well, I will say that if I were living in Tennessee, I would probably go right to the registrar's office and see if I could get on the wait list, just like Bonnie, and try to take your course. The other thing is we at Marsy's Law have gone all around the country, and Marsy's Law is now the law in many states around the country. And as part of the process, before it is passed, we go into the states and talk to all the different stakeholders. And I will say that the state of Tennessee is absolutely incredible as far as the care and the depth of knowledge, from prosecutors' offices to healthcare workers to victim service providers to all the incredible organizations like the coalition that we just talked about, Tennessee Voices for Victims.
Yes.
And it is really so heartwarming and encouraging to know that, and then right up to academia, that there are experts like all of you, but also people who have a passion and a soul and a heart, that your authenticity and your genuineness of caring for victims, it really is something that's so prevalent across the state. It's incredibly impressive. It's encouraging and heartwarming all at the same time. So the work that all of you are doing statewide is amazing. I continue to get blown away by it. Just like Bonnie Brzezina told me that she was when she sat in your class in the academy. So I look forward to staying in touch and following your work and reading your research. And thank you so much for all the great, great work you do.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. There's some great folks in Tennessee that are doing wonderful things.
Fantastic. Have a great semester.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Policastro.